When I was 20 years old, I dropped out of college because my grades were so bad that I did not know I no longer qualified for financial aid and I couldn't go to school. But I returned to college when I was 25 and I went on to get academic honors and to be accepted into multiple graduate programs to then pursue a doctorate degree in physical therapy. And what the difference is that I learned how to learn. And from my experience, I can tell you that there are certain things that are backed by evidence to be effective for learning information. One of the main methods in learning information is the active recall method. There's a lot of questions around that idea and what it really means and how to use it right. And I'm going to give you three of those tips today in this video about how you can use that to take your struggling methods of learning or your basically transform yourself from someone who's struggling to learn to someone who can actively learn information very well. So that's what I'm going to talk about in today's video of three things that I can tell you about that work really well, three methods that you can apply today or tomorrow, whenever you have class, to really learn and retain information super, super, super well. Before I get into the video, let me introduce myself really quick. I'm Josh. I'm a former doctorate of physical therapy student. For multiple years of my life, I was fully immersed in the academic world where that was all I did. I spent years studying, learning, absorbing information, learning how to prioritize and battle burnout and stuff like that. And now I teach people like you worldwide how to learn information, how to go about absorbing information, how to go about excelling academically and performing at an elite level, to be accepted into graduate school and do things like that. So if that's kind of stuff that you're into, that's what you're going to find on this channel. Um, I encourage you to subscribe to my Substack where I send out this kind of information via a newsletter a few times a month right to your inbox, completely free. And yeah, it's just a few times a month. It's academic tips and advice from me right to you. It's completely free, right to your inbox. Um, and I also encourage you just to subscribe to the channel so you can see when I post videos that can help you. So with that being said, let me talk about one of the best ways to just go about using the active recall technique, where you're recalling information, you're retrieving it from memory actively, because we know from studies that that's really the best way to learn and retain information, to process it. So one of those methods, method number one, is actually what I like to call the brain dump technique. And this is where, as you're walking out of the classroom, you are basically asking yourself, what did I learn today? What's the number one thing? What's the number two thing? What's the top two, three things, two to four things, really, I guess, that I can remember from today's lecture as I walk out that I can kind of leave at the door? As you're walking out, just try to think of that. You're actively retrieving what you learned that day. You're putting it into essentially, you don't even have to say it out loud, you just do it in your head. You don't have to write it down even. But just the act of, as you're walking out, be like, okay, so I'm leaving the class today. Now, what was it that I learned? What can I remember from this class, from this session that I retained? Just list one, two, three, four things, just a few things. Even if it's just one, that one thing is probably the most important thing from the lecture, and the act of recalling it and retrieving it before you walk out of the class already gives you a slight edge. So that's one of the things that you should do. It's a brain dump walkout. Number two, let me look at my notes really quick. Number two is a really effective study method. I don't really have a name for it, but it's essentially before you ever open up your notes to study for a test, the study period, you sit down and you have your notes in front of you and you just ask yourself, okay, before I open up my notes and start studying, what are the things that I have learned about the last few days or last few weeks? And you actively try to think of those things. What can I recall from the last few days that was really important in this class? What are the things that we talked about? Try to bring that to the forefront of your brain. I'm doing a video. Can you come back in a minute? will be soon. Can you go out for a minute? I'll be back in a minute, okay, Audie? Sorry about that, guys. My daughter is wanting me for a second. I told her I'll be back soon. Uh, Lost my train of thought. Okay, so before you ever actually open up your notes and study, you want to ask yourself, what are the key things? You want to retrieve that information, those key things, as much of that information as you can. An example of how I use this today. I'm right now reading this book for like, I've read it before. I got it many years ago, but it's called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And before I opened it up today and started reading it, I asked myself, okay, what was the stuff that I read the last couple of mornings? What was the stuff that I remember? I tried to recall that information. And I said, okay, yeah, he was talking about X, he was talking about Y, he was talking about Z. And I kind of rephrased it into my own words. And that right there, the act of recalling what you've already kind of read about, learned about, heard about, and trying to put it into your own words a little bit, it's a super powerful method for you to be able to just use the active recall technique because you're retrieving information from memory after you've already learned about it. And we know, like I've already mentioned from studies, that that is the best way to learn information and to retain information is to actively recall it. So that's method number 2. Method number 3 is, I talked about this in some other videos. It's essentially the blank page technique. So this is, as you're studying, this is another really great way to use the active recall technique. As you're studying, you want to just study for a set period of time. I like 20 minutes. You can choose whatever works for you. You study for 20 minutes. You close your notes, you close your book, you set it off to the side, and then you ask yourself with a blank sheet of paper to recall as much information as you can, and you just write it all down. It doesn't even matter if it's pretty, you just scribble it down. It can be on a blank sheet of paper and you just throw it away. It can be on a whiteboard and then you erase it. The whole idea is that you're retrieving that information from memory and you're writing it down, because when you do that, when you write it down, that also leads to a lot of brain activity because you're being highly engaged in the content that you're trying to learn. So it's really effective to write it down. You don't have to, but just try to recall what you can every so often. Like I said, like 20 minutes. That seems to be the best way to really learn information effectively. So, in a nutshell, the 3 really good ways you can use today, if you get anything from this video, to try to use the idea of active recall in your studies. Not just rereading things again and looking at notes again and highlighting things that feel productive where you're looking at it and recognizing it. You need to train your brain to recall that information. That is how you learn. That's how you lead students learn. That's the best way to go about studying effectively. So the 3 ways are the mind dump, walkout, where as you walk out the door, you're recalling top couple things that you learned from that lecture. Number 2 is you study stuff from memory before you actually even study. You recall, what was it? What are the few things that we've been talking about in class last few days, last few weeks? What are the big ideas? What are the big concepts? What can I tell you about that? Either say it out loud or write it down. And then number 3 is the blank page technique, where you are actively writing down things from memory that you can recall after a short study session. That causes you to pull that information from memory. All 3 of those do. And we know if you want to be an elite student, you've got to use the methods that work. Not highlighting things and looking through notes again. You need to recall things from memory. Like I said, when I was reading this morning, I asked myself, what can I remember from this, from reading the last few days before I actually ever opened it up? That's basically the recall before you study method. If you do that consistently each time you sit down to study, you're going to get killer results. You're going to have a really good pathway to access that information in your brain and to be able to recall it and retrieve it easily. So those are my top 3 tips for using that method. There's a lot of other ways to use it, but I can guarantee you that you're going to see the results if you use those methods, because you're going to basically be recalling on the most important concepts from your classes. So I highly, encourage you to implement at least one of them this week. Try it out. Let me know. Comment in the video if you like this idea. I want to hear from the results that you guys got. I'd be really excited to know if it's working for you. I know it will, because I've used it and I went through multiple graduate classes using these techniques and they work. So I'm happy to share this with you and I'm happy to help you. With that being said, do not forget to subscribe to my Substack so I can give you this information in short articles right to your inbox, completely free. And if you liked this video, make sure you check out this video as well. And we will see you guys in the next episode.